Okay, so I've already transferred half of my stitches from the loom onto the other half, and I'm now going to do the Kitchener bind off for my toe. I'm using the 40 peg 3/8 inch gauge Cindy Wood loom, and I'm working on some socks. Please see my other video on how to transfer the stitches. What I like to do first is, okay, so I have my tail end of my yarn on the peg right here. I like to go to the opposite end and kind of tighten up, because it sometimes gets loose, each stitch first. Let me just zoom out a little bit. And just use your loom hook and pull on it, and see as you pull on the one, it pulls the other one. And that is the first step that I find helpful. Now you don't want to over tighten it. You just want to tighten it because during transfer they can loosen up a bit. So you want it to kind of tighten it so that it matches about the same tension as you had been working, as you can see there. So now I'm ready. I have quite a bit of extra yarn, so I'm going to cut a little bit off. I usually just kind of wrap it around my loom roughly 3 times. And then I cut the working yarn so that I don't have too much to work with. And I'm ready then to take the tail end and thread it through a yarn needle. And that's the first step that I do for the Kitchener bind off. Okay, so I have my yarn needle threaded, tapestry needle, and starting with the first peg where your working yarn is, there's 2 loops on each peg, and I know it's really hard to see because I have almost the same color yarn as pegs. The first step is to go down the peg that's on the bottom of, or the stitch that's on the bottom of the peg, and pull your yarn through. Make sure it doesn't get hooked onto any of the adjacent pegs. Now go through the top stitch that's on the peg downwards, just like you did to the bottom. And pull through. Next, you're going to go up to the next peg over, and you're going to use the top stitch that's on the peg and take your yarn needle and pull the yarn up through the top stitch all the way through. Then you're going to bring it back to the peg that you just did before in the bottom stitch. And you can kind of see 2 little V's. It's hard to see here, but the bottom stitch that's there, you don't want to bring them through both, just the bottom stitch. From the bottom of the bottom stitch and up. And here is where now I like to pull tight. Now I'm going to go on and do peg. I'm going to do peg 2. I'm going to, starting with the bottom stitch on that peg, pull the yarn from the top through to the bottom of the bottom stitch on the peg, and then the top stitch on the peg I'm going to go from the top of the peg through the bottom. Now I'm going to go one stitch over, and just like we did before, I'm going to pull up through from the bottom up of the top peg stitch on the peg, and then back over the bottom stitches on the peg, go from the bottom of the bottom stitch and up. Pull tight. And you keep repeating this process. So the next peg again, we're going to go from the bottom. We're going to work starting with the bottom loop that's on the peg, the bottom stitch that's on the bottom. We're going to take our yarn needle and starting from the top, pull it downward. And then the stitch that's on the top, take our yarn needle, pull it downward, make sure that it doesn't get twisted around any of the pegs. Move over, go up to the next peg, and the top stitch on the next peg, pulling the yarn needle from the bottom of that stitch up through to the top, back over, and now we're doing the bottom stitch going up to the top, and you just keep repeating that step, those steps. And now I pull tight. And once again, I'll show you one more time and then I'll meet you up when I'm at the end. So I'm going, there's 2 stitches on the loom. I'm going through the bottom stitch on the loom from the top, bringing my yarn needle and my working yarn from the top of the bottom stitch on the peg downwards, or knitwise, and then the top stitch, just the one, bring it from the top and down. And my yarn got hooked onto my, sorry, hooked into my tripod. Go over one, I'm working now with the top stitch. Bring your yarn through up, and then over again, through the bottom of the peg, upwards. Pull tight. And it's starting to look like that. And do one more. Going to the next peg over, the bottom peg, or the bottom stitch on the peg, pull your yarn from the top down to the bottom, then bring your yarn needle above the top stitch, just through the top stitch on the peg, down through the bottom. Over to the next peg, top stitch take your yarn needle, bring it up, starting from the bottom of the stitch on the top of the peg, and bring it up through that stitch. And then over through the bottom of the stitch. And you just keep repeating that until the end, and then I'll show you the rest. Okay, so I'm almost to the end, and I have 2 pegs left that I have to do. And so I'm going to do again, down through the stitch that's on the bottom of the peg, down through the stitch that's on the top of the peg, up through the next stitch, top of the stitch on the next peg over, up through the bottom stitch of the previous peg, pull tight, and now your last stitch has, or your last peg has 2 stitches on. I'm going to go down through the bottom, and then down through the top of the stitch on the peg. And pull tight. Now you have completed the Kitchener bind off while on the loom, and you can now start to remove it from the loom. And I just use my loom hook, and starting with the peg that I last did, I lift up and off each stitch, going all the way back to where you first started. Doing your Kitchener bind off. And your toe is now completed. I kind of just pull on it a little bit. You don't want to pull on the tail end real tight. It should give you a nice seamless finish. You can use your yarn needle then to take your, I bring it in through usually this stitch over here, and then just in towards the sock, and then turn it out, and turn it once it's inside, turn it inside out, and then weave it in a little bit on the inside and clip it. And there you have the toe of your sock completed. And the bind off, which looks really, really good. Hope this helps. Thanks for joining me. Please subscribe to my channel. Comment if you have any questions or positive things to say. I appreciate your viewership and hope that you find this helpful, and keep watching as I hope to be adding more videos onto my channel soon. Thanks.